Once you fall in love with a person, men usually say, as the women, that they want to have a partner with equal shares of paid and unpaid work. But then suddenly, if we observe those couples over time, after this kid arrived,
it doesn't happen.
Usually even increase their workload, while women considerably decrease their workload. And there is how the gender pay gap starts to develop and the gender care gap. So negotiate. And I mean, for your partner as well, it should be the thing to strive at, to live with a person who will be happy in 10 years or in 20 years.
Get Inspired, your podcast for more inspiration and your business talk about how to connect, how to empower, and how to get inspired. With amazing guests interviewed by Ricarda, our founder of My Collective.
This week we have a fantastic talk with world-renowned sociologist Professor Dr. Jutta Allmendinger about unconscious bias, division of care work, and life-changing career advice if you're planning to be a parent or to go on parental leave. Jutta, welcome to My Collective. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you very, very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Can I do a short introduction of you? And I will keep it short, but I do want to mention a couple of things. Jutta Allmendinger is a German sociologist, and she's the president of the WZB, the Berlin Social Science Center, a professor for educational sociology and labor market at the Humboldt University, and she's also a senior fellow at the Center of European Studies at the Harvard University. Now, when I look at your CV, there's a huge number of awards that you've also gained, which I will not go through all of them, but one which I really liked is being the member of the G7 Gender Equality Advisory Council, which I think is really important because we're talking about gender equality here today, and the rest of the CV you guys will have to look up on the internet. But what I think is most important about this, and this is why I'm also so happy to have you here, Jutta, is that you're not hidden somewhere in the world of academia. You're actually out there in the media, in politics. You make your voice heard. And one of the times when I think, at least from my perspective, it was heard mostly was also when all of us started to go into lockdown, and you published an article or a study that actually showed that there's something happening during that lockdown and during this beginning of the corona phase to gender equality. And this study showed that we're not doing very well anyway in Germany in terms of female participation on the C-level in our industry. And we were at that time actually also facing a backwards trend. And you making your voice heard actually led to a big discussion, and I could say ultimately also accelerated our move in Germany to actually get a quota for women on boards. So now, my question, Jutta, it seems like the tide has shifted and the trend is going upwards now. Does that mean we are on the right track? How is your perspective on this upwards trend now, given that we have a new quota and a new coalition?
Well, I think that we have to be very, very cautious here. Look at those 4 women who are now presidents of German states. I mean, this is a big thing. We never have had this before. But to be realistic, it's just 1/4, actually. It's 4 out of 16. So we are now at a number of 25% of all Ministerpräsidentinnen, as we say in Germany. The same pertains to universities. If you look at the highest rank in Germany, those are W3 positions. We are at a very, very low number of 22%. This does not mean that we don't have to celebrate progress, but I'm not sure whether this progress is stable. And the reason why I'm not sure about this is because we lost many, many wonderful, highly gifted women, in particular in science, who were, on parental leave, who were working part-time, trying to come back, and then the corona hits them. And the corona cut their social networks, and indeed they also lost their academic networks, and they did not gain new networks. And this is important for my business. This is truly important for your business as well. So I'm not sure, whether or not this next generation is not scarred in a way profoundly. So let's wait and see, and let's wait and not just wait and look, but wait and work for future progress.
Okay, so that's the effect of the corona pandemic, and we can't really say that we're in a post-pandemic phase yet, I guess. But things have changed. I mean, there is the so-called FUPO 2, so our new law about the quota, and we have a coalition contract that also addresses the topic. What's your perspective on that?
Sorry for interrupting you, but this is not how I perceive it. The new coalition contract means that women have probably an easier time to combine work and motherhood. Yes, I clearly see this. The way the transition between being at home and coming back to the labor market is easier now, or will be easier now than it has been before. But we expected much more. We expected that the tax laws change. We still have this splitting system, which really puts huge advantages to families where one person earns very much more than another one, and this does not really help women. They did not increase the months for fathers for more than 3 months. Other countries are way ahead of this. So it's much more about combining work and the family, much more directed for, as we call it, mommy tracks, but not combining, as all of you do, a career and a family.
I mean, it's interesting. This Ehegattensplitting is a topic in itself, I would say. But if you summarize it in something where you say, I mean, this is also what we at my collective quite often focus on, is that during this family creation time, especially the parental leave, it's the decision-making time if you want to go for kids and a job or kids and a career. So now, why is it the case that this hasn't been taken serious? Is there, the urge is not there, or why is it sort of focused on jobs only and not career?
Well, a very easy answer would be that this is a coalition out of 3, and that not all 3 members of this Ampel coalition agreed. And I think that in particular, the Free Democrats, they have not many women and not many outspoken women, or not many women interested in this topic. And I think it's due to them that this Ehegattensplitting still survived. So there are a couple of people also in the CDU and the Christian Democratic Party, they are not in power right now, who, for example, openly combat Annalena Baerbock for being, a woman who wears now nice clothes and not just whatever, the usual Angela Merkel dress code and things like this. So we are making progress. I entirely agree with you. But there are still many people who only pay lip service, but don't take this issue seriously. Not have enough men really fighting for something which is not just a female issue, but it's a joint issue for both parents, actually.
So when you talk about being a joint issue, I've read an article in the Spiegel that you've just recently published about where you basically called men to care more and to actually also help in the care work. So now we, at my collective at least, we're convinced that it's possible to do job and career, and you need more fluid and innovative working models. But I guess you probably also need new concepts for care work, because it seems that care work is nowhere near being split in an equal setting. And from what you have written is women are still taking more care or still doing more of the care work than men do. There's a huge gap, and the gap even widens in the pandemic. So why is that the case? Because that's really a private decision, I would assume, right?
Not for me. No, I'm a sociologist, and there's something like private decisions. I mean, we are all living in a context of political and legal rules. We are living in a context where certain cultures and traditions persist. And one wonderful example for this is not just looking at the differences between Scandinavian countries, for example, or France and Germany, but just look at differences between Eastern and West Germany, where in East Germany, they had this culture of, both parents working full time. And even in the third generation, this culture is sort of in the heads of mothers as well as of fathers. So this culture survives. So we are not free in an empty room where we can make private decisions. There are little carrot sticks here and there, like the tax law I talked about, or like other things, parental leave systems. And we know that those things matter a lot, and that private decisions are, most of the time thought to be private, but they are much patterned by the culture and what other people are doing and how other women behave if they become a mother. And this you sort of then socialize to your own kids. And this is why cultures are surviving also structural changes.
And this is why we are actually meeting here in the My Collective ground, because you actually do need peers around you in case you want to think about new models, and you need to have other people who have at least the same questions and the same sort of, let's say, outlook on working models, and hopefully also some solutions. I mean, when you talk about traditions...
where I interrupted you quite harshly, and I said, well, no, we are not having those private decisions, and the private is political, as we all know. At the same time, of course, there are also private decisions. Given this context, you can decide in this way, or you can decide in another way.
Of course you can,
can, simply say, well, we'll have a family, but this means that both of us will have to do their share, both in terms of taking care of our children, but also in the old age of our parents. I mean, this is more or less the same. Where women are doing much, much more unpaid work. And then we can also share the paid work. I mean, this would be one path. And when I talk to my students and when I talk to other people, I'll always say, well, if you make decisions like this, just think for a moment what the decisions you are taking right now mean for your life in 10 years or in 20 years. Because if you are staying out of the labor market for too long a time without being connected, to peers or to your employer, you will lose contact and you will re-enter part-time, and then you lose your qualification. And then the partner, mostly the male partner, will have had his career, and you are this more or less lone woman sitting at home saying, oh, my kids are grown up, they have their own life, but you do not have a life of your own because you spend everything to the household and raising the children. So I mean, this usually helps just to change the perspective. Think, how do you want to live in 10 years or 20 years from now? And how do I behave now so that I can achieve this goal?
It definitely helps to look in the future. But I think there's also, as you said, there are a couple of patterns or old ideas that kind of stick with you. And I mean, quite often when you talk about traditions in this field, this kind of old ghost of the Rabenmütter comes up, which is this word that doesn't even exist in any other language than in German. And I feel like none of us here in this group has ever actually been accused of being a Rabenmutter or would actually say it. But I think it's been slightly replaced by something that we call Bindungsforscher. This is sort of this field of attachment, because we kind of do think, what is the limit of how much work can I do? How much work can I not do? How much time can I be away from my children? How much not? And there's a huge discussion about, is it 70% that I should go back to work? Is it 72, 75, 78? It's sort of somewhere between 75 and 100 for those who actually want to do a career. And still, even though it actually seems such a small difference, it makes a huge difference in terms of your career. So question number one would be, why is the discussion so limited? Does it really make a difference for a career? And the second question would be, What is it with these sort of attachment stories that your kid would be more attached to you if you work 70% and less if you work 100%? How does that work?
So first of all, I mean, in our heads and minds, we still have this implicit association that a kid belongs to the mother, and we still have this picture of a Rabenmütter. And so what we are doing in my institute is to run lots of experiments. And one of these experiments, to be very short and just say how it works, is that we send out letters, that we send out applications to employers, initial applications. And we send out applications of a woman who interrupted for 2 months. And then we are waiting how often this woman will be invited for a job talk. And we compare the number of invitations to a woman with absolutely the same CV, but interrupted for 10 months. And what we can see is that a woman who has interrupted for 10 months is much more likely to be invited for a job talk than a woman who are interrupted for 2 months. And then we talk to those people at human development departments in those huge organizations. And then, those officers tell us, well, probably, this woman who interrupted only for 2 months is too ambitious, too motivated, is probably, not a good team player. And all of those attitudes then come up. And this for me is nothing else but, a survival of this Rabenmütter. So this is my first sort of little empirical result, which I can replicate over the years. And we redid it last year, and there is the same result.
It stays the same.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because if men interrupt 2 months or 10 months, they are not harmed. They are invited. It's a very, very same level. So it doesn't make any difference. So this is my first answer. The second, this is attachment. I mean, there are thousands of medical studies, of psychological studies, whatever, social psychological studies, that children just need to be close to people, that they have to experience love, but that they develop wonderfully, regardless whether you spend 50% of your time in the labor market or 80% or full. It's that you have quality time, that those children feel your love. This is the important thing. And there is no difference whatsoever between full-time working mothers. Like in East Germany, we could do very, very good comparisons back then, full-time working mothers to non-working mothers, and kids even say in later life, well, my mother has a wonderful and caring relationship to me, regardless of how long they interrupted. And those are really very, very valid results. It's not necessarily the case, that you can't make a career with 80% of the time or something like this. We have models like dual leadership, and this becomes easier the more we are living in a digitalized world, And of course, I mean, this once I cared for my mother, I was on this dual leadership, and it worked wonderfully. It worked even better than before, because then I have 500 employees. They could turn to one person who was sort of closer to them and more sympathetic probably than me, and vice versa. So it was a wonderful time.
So can I ask you if you could give us a couple of concrete tips? At my collective, we basically look at parental leave. So most of our participants and most of the people also listening to us are either right during parental leave or shortly after. Can you give some tips and advice on what to do to actually make a career happen? Is it finding new innovative working models and pushing through them, or is it discussing at home and getting your carework right, or is it a combination of both? Can you share something that you as an individual can change as we said before, a personal sort of decision?
I mean, the first thing which I would always advise you to do is to talk to your boss, to your employer, and say, well, I would like to have a kid, but I'm also very, very interested in having a career. And this helps. Just this signal that you are looking and heading for a career and don't want to go on this mummy track is a very, very important signal. And this is also what the literature says. The second is, so if you take time off, which most mothers do, and this is nothing bad about it, but you still have to keep contact to your
stay in contact,
to your to your group, to your team, to your boss, and I usually advise them to at least come in twice a month and talk, so that they are that they remain known in a way, so that we all remember, oh, there is this wonderful woman who is now in parental leave. So this is very important for this reason, that they remember you, but it's also psychologically very, very important for yourself, because once you are out of the labor market and just care for your children, you sort of develop another scheme of what is important and what is not important. Your time schedule changes. Everything is sort of grouped around the children. You talk about the children. When you see other people, you talk about the children. I mean, you sort of get away from what has interested you before. And that's fine, but don't get totally lost. I mean, don't get totally immersed in children's stuff. I mean, that's the second lesson. The third lesson is release, prepare for re-entry. And you can do this smoothly, but then talk to your team and talk quite openly on how you want to take the different steps. So probably it's not a good idea to return from 0% to 100%, but to say, well, in the first 2 months, we returned 50% and then 75 and then 6 like this. So that's it. Then take care of your childcare as soon as possible. So even if you plan for children, I mean, way before they are born, I would make very sure that you find a good way, nanny or a public childcare facility who is reliable, and so please form your network for your child, for your kid. This is very important as well. And then, and this is how we started this conversation, of course, it is very important that you talk to your partner. And this is one thing that once you fall in love with a person, men usually say, as the women, that they want to have a partnered life with equal shares of paid and unpaid work. But then suddenly, if we observe those couples over time, after this kid arrived,
it doesn't happen.
Usually even increase their workload, while women considerably decrease their workload. And there is how the gender pay gap starts, and the gender income gap starts to develop, and the gender care gap. So this is really, I mean, very, very obviously one of the reasons. So negotiate and well, but I can simply repeat what I said before. I mean, for your partner as well, I mean, it should be the thing, to strive at, to live with a person who will be happy in 10 years or in 20 years from now.
Well, this is quite a long list, guys. I hope you have been listening to all of this and noting it down. And I think it starts from talking to your partner to talking to yourself as well, and also necessary, obviously, to your company as well. And I would like to maybe just one more question about this, sort of in terms of tips and tricks. I'm also believe that you don't need to wait for an entire society to change or for the entire HR system in your company to change. You can do it yourself. Even this staying in contact. There are a couple of companies out there that still take whatever, the mobiles or the laptops, or even they delete the emails of people who go on parental leave. But communication is always possible, right? So you can do it. And you can kind of, let's say, own your own career and basically go about communicating and seeing what's happening in your company. But from the company's perspective, there are obviously probably also a couple of things that they would need to do, right? Do you have some suggestions for those?
Yes. I mean, create a welcoming culture. I mean, that's very, very important. So whenever, a kid is born, I send them a nice letter saying, well, great, congratulations for this kid, all the very best. And I know that you will have a couple of very, very hard weeks. But I love to see you at this dinner party in 3 months. And then I send a reminder. So it's me who really tries to keep them in contact, in very close contact. If they tell me that they're interested to come back, I mean, that I have to say. I mean, I'm not the person who decides about the lives of others, but we usually have a very long conversation on what they plan and how they try to both get a professorship. This is what my profession is, as well as having a family. And and then we talk about this project, and then you probably can start with this project while being still at home and things like this. And of course, employers also, I mean, I don't have big conferences in the evening where we do not record those meetings so that you can listen to them later. So big conferences, networking conferences are usually placed during the days and not in the evening. And if the evening is the only possible time, I provide childcare for really young children as well. And I have thousands of networks where other men or women take care of the children of those who present or attend a conference. So there are lots of things you can do as an employer, but you first have to learn that it's not, as you so nicely said before, it's not about combining family and work. This is what we have to learn. It's about combining family and a career for those who want to have a career. And this is quite a different thing. In most audits of German companies, at least, so the audit Beruf and Familie and others, they only look at combining family and work. They don't ask one question about combining work and career. And this is to the disadvantage of women still.
And what's actually quite interesting is that having babies actually does increase your leadership skills. At least that's the way that we see it here. And so it does actually also prepare you a little bit for what is there to come in a career. Can I end with our last question, exactly about these kind of converting parenting skills into leadership skill? Can you maybe share which parenting skills you see are specifically catchy or are specifically important also in a career path and as a leadership skill?
Well, first of all, I'm not a person who is deeply into basic gender differences. So what I'm saying now pertains to women, but it also pertains to men. So I'm not making huge differences here. So what you learn if you have a children, that you have to do many things at the same time. You cannot, I mean, even cooking and watching a kid or something like this. So you have to do this multitasking. You have to be at the phone, whether it's for the job or with your parents or whatever, but you learn this multitasking and you learn to do it quite smoothly, actually. And you learn not to get too stressed out by doing this. And this, again, it means this pertains to women as well as for men. And this is quite important if you are looking for a leadership position, because times which you have where you can concentrate on one thing only are very, very rare in this position. You also learn to speak out. So at least this is what I learned when I had kids, that I felt not well treated in a couple of situations. Like I was treated like a mother who has now children, but not as a woman also having an occupation. And so I learned to talk about this. This new skill I also could use in my job very, very well. So to simply speak out.
To make your voice heard, yeah.
Make your voice heard, yes. And of course, it also helps you to simply understand in which situation other people are. So it's a measure how you form trust to others, just to think how you lived in this situation. And then, those are the situations your team members are in as well. And this also is is really important for forming good leadership skills, understanding trust, and not this sort of, you have to control everything because you didn't want to be controlled.
Yeah, again, who wants to be controlled? I think these are a couple of very good leadership skills that we could all use and need in our industry as well. Jutta, thank you so much for being with us. I would like to say goodbye and thank you so much.
Bye-bye, and thank you for all your work. It's important, and it's probably the right angle, which we did not hit for a very, very long time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.